In 1953, American professor Charles Sampton published an article claiming that there was already an advanced civilization before humans came into existence on Earth. This idea seemed completely unbelievable at the time. However, later on, the CIA classified certain parts of the study as classified documents. In the end, our planet has been around for more than 4.5 billion years, and the Homo sapiens species emerged approximately 300,000 years ago. Are we sure that the Earth did not host any other beings during such a long period? The latest discoveries in this field will certainly lead us to question everything we know. In this video, we will explore the possibility of another civilization developing on Earth millions of years before the rise of humanity. Let's get started. The uncertainties of the past are filled with many gaps discussed in general terms by scientists. One of these paradoxes is the construction of pyramids. While researchers claimed that people of that era were merely primitive societies, who built these monumental structures? These include the Chichén Itzá Pyramid in Mexico, the tomb of Pharaoh Joseph in Egypt, and the temple in Cambodia. What's interesting is that they were all constructed based on the same principle, but at entirely different times. Some similarities among these pieces of evidence are challenging the entirety of human history. The stones on the walls fit together so perfectly that not even a strand of hair could slip through the gaps, and all of this was done without any adhesive mortar. Walls with similar structures have also been found near the Cusco city in Peru, as well as in Greece, Japan, and even on Easter Island. Many of these locations are separated by vast oceans. It is suggested that all these structures were built by the same culture, a culture far more advanced than the people of that time. Of course, such a theory may seem like a fantasy at the moment. But if we don't at least start searching, how can we discover traces of an ancient civilization? This view is shared by Jason Wright, a leading astronomer at Pennsylvania State University. Some of the most mysterious phenomena of antiquity are considered incredible technological achievements of the Indus Valley civilization. In 1829, an explorer named Charleston stumbled upon the remains of a city called Harami, in what is now the territory of present-day Pakistan. The city's layout was unique. Its streets were meticulously planned, running in precise north-south and east-west directions. But what was the purpose behind this careful organization? According to archaeological findings, many residents of this prehistoric capital had their own pools, which they had expertly constructed. The builders had a superb system in place, making the lower part of the pools waterproof with resin and passing fresh water through specially designed pipes, along with a sophisticated drainage system to efficiently remove wastewater. Meanwhile, other civilizations struggled to construct basic huts, and building such pools without specialized tools would have been impossible. The people of the Indus civilization seemed to know how to use complex iron tools long before the rest of the world. What's most intriguing is that scientists were able to confirm this remarkable discovery based on findings from an entirely different region in 1936. During excavations near the village of Saqqara in Egypt, archaeologists unearthed massive granite boxes used in burial ceremonies, which they called salopium. Egyptian scientists claim that these boxes were made during the 18th dynasty period, between approximately 1550 and 1300 BC. However, during that era, Egyptians hardly used any metal tools. So, how could they have created these granite boxes with perfect right angles and remarkably flat and thin walls? Furthermore, some of these boxes had strange markings and peculiar grooves on their walls. Doesn't this remind you of something we've seen before? Like the holes made by modern drills. Could a more advanced civilization have contributed to the development of ancient Egyptian society with their complex equipment? But why do we still know so little about such an advanced culture? The answer seems to lie, according to astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt. In 2007, scientists attempted to imagine what traces our civilization would leave behind if it suddenly disappeared one day. Their answers ranged from massive megacities to perhaps only a thick layer of moss surviving without humans. If those before us had also built a civilization, we would have discovered it by now. Archaeological excavations would have aided us in this quest. However, despite centuries of searching, people have yet to find prehistoric skyscrapers. Does this mean they never existed? Or is everything not as straightforward as it seems? According to Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, our cities will disappear from the Earth within just 10,000 years, leaving behind randomly scattered giant rocks. This doesn't say much about the development of our civilization, does it? It appears that once again, only archaeology can help us find the closest evidence. But as time passes, these traces sink underground and eventually turn to dust. Very little evidence remains of what those living tens of thousands of years ago actually did. But what if a society before them built its own civilization on Earth? You'll probably mention plastic materials much later than organic matter. At least, would we have come across their traces? If there really was an advanced civilization before us, they should have definitely left such traces. However, according to researcher Alan Wiesmann's claim, if humans were to stop all activities right now, a significant portion of our plastic waste could break down in just 20,000 years due to ultraviolet rays and bacteria. For example, if a global catastrophe had wiped out the previous civilization, its traces would have disappeared even faster. However, some survivors might have settled in different regions and transferred their knowledge to different cultures, which could explain how ancient civilizations like Egypt and the Indus reached such high levels. What further complicates the question is that today, less than 3% of the Earth's surface is inhabited. Even if a previous civilization had left waste like plastic, finding it would be more challenging than finding a single grain of sand on a vast beach. So how can we be sure that a society like ours existed a billion years ago? When the Earth was just beginning to form, about 4.5 billion years ago, the climate was much more challenging than it is today. The planet was constantly bombarded by meteors and comets, and the atmosphere consisted mainly of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and methane. No known species could survive under such harsh conditions. However, perhaps all of this provided an ideal environment for entirely different beings. Max Birdstile, the head of NASA's scientists in Washington, D.C., believes that a civilization in such a climate would have to be highly capable. After all, he suggests that living beings capable of transmitting knowledge, which are the fundamental criteria for the functioning of life, from generation to generation, might exist, while other beings might not even comprehend the basic aspects of life, such as reproduction or metabolism, under such conditions. However, the tools used for this could be anything. In this case, even billions of years ago, an entire society could have developed without the help of DNA molecules. When a crystal grows, new atoms adhere to its surface layer by layer, and when a small crystal plate breaks off, it is quite similar to the birth of a new organism. Furthermore, such a civilization may not leave traces overnight. So should we completely stop searching for everything? Or do we still have a chance to find the prehistoric ancestors of humans? Can an advanced civilization really leave no evidence at all? According to Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, we should continue to search for something. Physical evidence may have a short lifespan, but what about the indirect impact on our planet? Complex structures and mechanisms may have disintegrated into atoms long ago, but couldn't these atoms have influenced the composition of the Earth's crust? Smith and Frank pointed out that any industrial civilization would require energy to exist. This means they would need additional energy sources such as oil, coal, or even large amounts of wood. Industrial tools with this energy intensity would undoubtedly leave physical or chemical traces deep within our planet. Therefore, it seems that we should search for emissions from production rather than the remnants of ancient factories. We describe this as looking for fingerprints during a criminal investigation. In such cases, we first try to gather as much information as possible, and then we start searching for the culprit. So why not apply the same method in the search for an ancient civilization? First and foremost, we should pay attention to places where radioactive elements have accumulated because it's unlikely they came to Earth on their own. Strangely, this leads us back to the mysterious Indus Valley civilization. During excavations in the Rajasthan state of northwestern India, archaeologists discovered a radioactive cultural layer. However, these incredible findings didn't end there. In 1977, researcher David Davenport began to dig and came across a crater with a diameter of 50 meters, where all the stones seemed to have melted within it. Moreover, these stones had turned into a substance resembling flesh. Such a phenomenon could only occur at temperatures as high as 1500 degrees Celsius, giving the impression that an ancient nuclear explosion had occurred in the lands of the Indus Valley civilization. Strangely, ancient legends seem to corroborate these bold speculations. The Mahabharata, one of the greatest epic works in Indian literature, holds significant cultural importance, not only in India, but also in many different parts of the world. Within its pages, there are details about an explosion so bright that it could burn all nations and shine as brightly as 10,000 suns. It also describes survivors losing their nails and hair after such an explosion, and the contamination of land and food. Doesn't this sound somewhat reminiscent of the aftermath of the nuclear disaster in Hiroshima? However, representatives of the Indus Valley civilization were still humans, even if they were advanced enough to produce nuclear weapons at that time. So, what about pre-human communities? Interestingly, in the history of our planet, there have been sudden periods of warming in various regions, just as caused by human activity. Around 56 million years ago, a similar event occurred on Earth, and the average temperature rose by up to 20 degrees even at the poles. It was impossible to attribute this extreme temperature increase to human activity. Some blame cyanobacteria, known as blue-green algae, which lived in the oceans during this period. The population of these bacteria in the oceans increased hundreds of times. However, how cyanobacteria could affect the climate was still a mystery, or were they byproducts of a more advanced community? This type of fungus, which was the underpinning of a mushroom, had the ability to consume radioactive waste and clean up the surrounding area. At this point, should we see ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution? Perhaps like these pre-human communities, other organisms have also greatly evolved. According to one theory, a civilization rises, reaches its peak, collapses, and starts over about every million years on Earth. Is this part of the planet's life cycle, or are all these hypotheses purely imaginative? In the end, despite all the speculation about the existence of ancient civilizations, we have no definitive evidence. However, these questions lead us to inquire and strive to go beyond the known. Perhaps, as humanity, we are taking the first steps towards understanding deeper truths that we have yet to begin comprehending. Exploring and discovering the theses of the prehistoric era can inspire researchers, including myself, in their future work. And these traces can assist us in seeing the larger picture of how life has evolved on our planet and in the universe. The time period extending from the Industrial Revolution to the present day is referred to by scientists as the Anthropocene era. This era is characterized by a trend of human activities increasing global temperatures and is also known as the Age of Humans. We know that similar periods of global warming have occurred in the past. So, could there be a resemblance between today's human-induced climate change and the warm periods of millions of years ago? To explore the answer to this question, the scientific community has sprung into action, and they have started to inquire whether previous periods of temperature increase could have also contributed to the development of intelligent life forms. In pursuit of finding the answer to this question, NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies has stepped in. The question of whether another civilization has existed in the Earth's 4.5 billion year history has arisen. However, finding what traces, if any, these civilizations left behind is a quite challenging task. Now, Smith and Frank have attempted to predict the geological traces that the Anthropocene era will leave behind in the future. They researched how extreme temperatures and sea level changes could leave marks in sedimentary rocks. They believed that these marks should bear similarities to the traces of past periods of extreme heat. Furthermore, they made efforts to understand whether climate change occurred due to human activities or natural causes. Smith and his team conducted a study called the Silurian hypothesis, while searching for clues to the existence of intelligent life forms in the pre-human era. However, finding and interpreting such traces is a quite challenging process. In the future, could there be remnants that indicate the presence of intelligent life forms on Earth? Or have these traces gradually disappeared? Traces from the pre-human era may not be distinct. Therefore, researchers are working to find clues of past civilizations among sedimentary rocks. Smith and his team are exploring various scenarios on how these traces can be found and interpreted. In conclusion, They are comparing similarities between past warm periods in Earth's history and today's human-induced climate change, in an effort to understand how these similarities might have influenced the development of intelligent life forms. However, more research and evidence are needed to reach a definitive conclusion. These studies could help us better understand humanity's place and impact in the planet's history. As for me, I'm just lonely human. The mysterious and shocking research will continue. See you in the next video.